Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to cake a minion. I baked 2 round cakes and a dome-shaped cake in the same diameter as my round cakes, and this is my red velvet cake recipe. And I cut the cakes into 3 layers and filled them with some white chocolate buttercream. And after the first 3 layers, I'm going to place a cake board on top. This is a Wilton cake board that has a hole in the center. And before I place the cake board, I'm using some wooden dowels for some extra support, and I use a food safe pen to mark the height of the dowels so I know where to cut them. After I've cut the dowels into the right height, I place them back into the cake and place the cake board on top and continue stacking the rest of my layers. I also place a wooden dowel in the center for some extra support so my cake won't collapse, because this minion cake is going to be really high. As you can see, the center dowel extends the height of my cake, so I cut it down to the right size. Now I'm applying a crumb coat to my cake, and I'm using an extra large cake scraper to scrape off the excess buttercream to smooth it down completely. If you have any cake that bulges out, just cut it away and fill it in with some extra buttercream. And continue smoothing your cake. For the dome-shaped part of the minion, I use a flexible smoother. This is actually a fondant smoother, but I think it works really well with smoothing buttercream. After you've smoothed down the cake, you can chill it in the fridge for 30 minutes to 1 hour, and then apply your final coat by repeating the same process, only applying a generous amount of buttercream to the sides and top, using your extra large cake scraper and your fondant smoother again. Your cake is as smooth as a minion's butt. You can put it in the fridge again to chill for a minimum of 2 hours, and in the meantime we're going to make some decorations. For the decorations, I printed out a template of a minion that has the same height and width as my cake, so I know how large the eyes need to be and the mouth and all of the other details. I rolled out some white fondant for the eyes and used cling film to make a more rounded edge. And then I rolled out some brown fondant fairly thick to make the goggles. If you want to make gold goggles, you can roll out some yellow fondant. And if you want to make silver goggles, you can roll out some gray fondant. I used the template as a guide to cut down the sides of the goggles to make them fit perfectly together. I made some indents to the sides of the goggles to place the sugar pearls in them later on when the goggles are attached to the cake. And here you can see a more detailed picture of the indents. Dust off the excess powder sugar, and we're moving on to making those side thingies on his goggles. Roll out a snake of fondant and cut it down to side using the template as a guide again. And round off the edges of those side details. And here you can see the difference of the rounded edge and the straight cut edge. Use a Dresden tool to make an indent in the middle and make that indent all the way around. For the eyes, I thinly rolled out some brown fondant and used the cookie cutter in the same size as the pupil on the template to cut out 2 circles. I also cut out 2 tiny circles of black fondant using a mini plunger cutter. I placed these black dots in the middle of my light brown fondant, and I used some white sprinkles to make the catch light of the eye. To make the eyes more realistic, I'm painting the outer edge with some brown gel food coloring using a very thin brush brush, and then I'm using a wider brush dipped in some water to thin out the paint, and I'm drawing some lines into the center black dot. I made this cake for my client a few months ago, and since Despicable Me 3 is coming out soon, I thought this would be a great time to post this tutorial. And my client wanted a pink minion, but of course you can make a yellow one as they are originally, but I think my pink one turned out really cute. Moving on to the rest of the details, I cut out the mouth of the template and rolled out a piece of black fondant to cut down the shape. To make the hands or gloves of the minion, I rolled out a ball of black fondant and tapered it a bit. I'm using my first hand as a guide to make two exact same hands. I made the fingers by cutting lines straight down, and then I'm rounding off the edges. I'm using a Dresden tool to make a hole inside the glove where the arm should be attached later on. And I'm pinching the sides to thin it out a bit. I made some indents on the side of the glove with a Dresden tool where the wrist of the minion is, and then I made a slit on the inside of the glove so I could bend the fingers a bit more, and then I dried them into the right position. For the shoes, I'm rolling black fondant into oval shapes and make sure they are the same size again. I'm pinching the sides of the bottom to make it more flat and straight, and then I'm using the blunt side of a knife to score a line for the sole. You can set these decorations to the side while you continue with the rest of your cake. Here I'm using the template as a guide where the strap of the goggles need to go, and then I'm measuring the height and circumference of the cake to panel the cake with some fondant. After I've cut down my fondant to the right measurements, I'm using a dowel to roll my fondant on top of this to make it more easier to apply it to the cake. After you've applied the fondant to the cake, use a ruler and a sharp knife to cut a straight seam at the back of the cake and then smooth it down with some fondant smoothers. Roll out a piece of fondant that is large enough to fit the dome shape of the cake and place it on top. You can also roll out a piece of fondant that is large enough to cover the entire cake in one time, but I didn't want to risk any tears or creases on my cute little minion, so I chose to panel it. Stretch out the fondant where there are any creases and smooth it down with your hands and a fondant smoother, and then cut off the excess fondant using a craft knife. And don't worry about the seams because it's going to be covered up with the straps of the goggles. I'm using the template again to mark out where the mouth of the minion needs to be, and I'm marking it with a Dresden tool first, and then I'm cutting it away with a craft knife. And now I'm placing in that black piece of fondant that I cut out earlier and pushing it in with my Dresden tool. For the teeth, I'm using the template as a reference to make some white pieces that I roll out and shape into the teeth of the minion. Attach the teeth with some water, and there is her cheeky grin. To paint the goggles, I used some metallic bronze luster dust and food grade alcohol and mixed it into a paint, and then I applied about 2 coats of this paint onto the goggles. Here I'm using a ribbon cutter to cut the strap of the goggles, and I'm rolling it up so it's easier to apply to the cake and your fondant won't stretch out. Apply the goggles with a bit of water and insert the eyes inside of them with a bit of water as well, and press down the goggles to fit the eyes perfectly so there aren't any gaps. Touch up your bronze powder again with a brush and then apply the strap with some water and make sure it's straight by using a ruler or a knife to check. Attach those side thingies on the side, and there is your minion with the eyes, and she looks so cute already. And now I'm placing some sugar pearls inside the indents that we made earlier. I'm using the template to make another template for the uniform of the minion, and I traced it onto the fondant, and I'm using a stitching tool to make some more details. I'm applying my uniform with a bit of water to the cake, but I'm not placing it directly onto the cake board because I'm making a ruffle skirt. If the hands are too heavy and don't stick to the cake, you can use some toothpicks for some extra support. I'm measuring the length of the arms, and then I'm rolling out a snake of fondant, and I'm cutting one straight edge and one slant edge, and then I'm attaching it to the cake with the straight edge into the glove and the slant edge onto the body. I'm using a Dresden tool to mark the V shape of the inside of the elbow. I also cut out two straps using a ribbon cutter and the stitching tool and attach these onto the uniform. For the hair of the minion, I rolled out two pieces of black fondant and I placed them on top of the cake, and then I cut down the overlapping part in the middle because my minion is going to have two braided ponytails. I'm using a Dresden tool to mark the hairlines to make it look more realistic. I used a braid mold to make two braids for my minion's ponytails, and then I attached them to the side, and then I rolled out a piece of black fondant into a tear shape and made some indents as well with the Dresden tool. I made a headband for my minion using a ribbon cutter again, and then I also made some bangs with some black fondant. And to finish off her cute hairstyle, I'm using a mold to make some ribbons, and I used two for each side, so on the top and on the bottom. For the skirt of the minion, I cut out some round circles using a cookie cutter again, and I'm thinning out the edges with a ball tool, and I'm placing the ball tool half on the foam board and half on the edge of the circles, and I'm making a circular motion. To make the ruffles, fold the circle in half and then pinch the sides together, and you can make a bunch of these ahead and then attach them to the cake with some water. So I placed all my ruffles to the side of the cake, and I'm finishing it off with some few last pieces. And here I'm showing you again how I made these ruffles. So you fold the circle in half and pinch it together. I used this Wilton mold to make 4 buttons for the uniform, and I will leave all the tools that I used in this tutorial in the description box below, so you can check that out later. And now it's time for the finishing touches. Just place the shoes any way you like them. You can attach them with some water, and she's done! She's so cute! I really hope you liked this tutorial. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of these videos, please subscribe, and see you again next time. Mwah!